Thank you. Thank you very much. That water that I didn't finish drinking, can you bring it? Hello?
Oscar, we can hear you, but your video is off.
My video? But you're hearing me, right?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You are welcome to this event, and we are happy that you all turned up very to start. We will start immediately by taking the Nigerian national anthem. Thank you very much. And I think one nation bound in freedom, peace, and unity. It actually gave me some energy all of a sudden. You are welcome to this discussion. It's a very important one, and it's happening at a very important time in the life of this country. We are not just going into the 2023 elections, but for us it's also a very important election representing the 7th consecutive elections, 24 years of unbroken democracy for this country, the longest since the return to democracy, and in all of Nigeria's 4 republics. I think this is a feat that we should be talking. We should actually celebrate. It will also be the second elections where an incumbent will not be on the ballot, the first being President Olusegun Obasanjo. if you are a West African watcher, you would actually be very happy and excited considering the spate of coup d'etat we have actually been experiencing in West Africa since 2020. So this is actually a positive for us. It's even a positive that we are seeing young people representing over 39% on the voters register. With middle age put together, that's like 70% plus. So this is not just a youth election, it's a youth plus middle age election, and one where Nigerians are excited irrespective of challenges to make a way forward. So it's a very important occasion, and this conversation could not have been coming had a better time than this. And it's even coming in a room where we have the young people who are going to determine this election coming to listen to a host of experts. And we have our former governor, whom of course those days while we were young, like you guys, we are all very excited about our former governor Donald Duke of Cross River State between 1999 and 2007. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you.
On my left, we have the director, or he calls himself the coordinator of AfriSME, which is a media literacy organization in Africa-based, not just Nigeria. Chido is a veteran journalist. And of recent has been doing a lot in terms of information integrity. Welcome, Chido. Yes. Right here beside me, I have my beautiful sister. I'm always inspired by her, particularly the work she does when it comes to security in this country. Shehu, director of the ooAM intelligence. She is not just a security expert, but an intelligence expert, and one of the best that you can actually think of in this regard. We will also be joined, I think, by General Abdulrahman Dambazao. He describes himself as an academic, a military man, a traditional title holder, and a politician. We are very lucky to have him join us. And here is my learned colleague, M.A. Yunusa, Mohammed Awal Yunusa, who is also a principal counsel at M.A. Yunusa. And period to that, he has worked in the firm of Wikitafa. Of course, he is one of the best also when you come to the legal profession. So we are very happy to have every one of them spend their time with us today to share their nuggets of wisdom, which we hope will go a long way in adding value to the forthcoming elections. So I'll turn to former Governor Donald Duke and start. And this question will actually be for everyone over, and not just for Donald Duke. And it's basically about what is our assessment of not just INEC, what is our assessment of these forthcoming elections? What do we perceive to be the negative, but importantly the positive that we should hold on to when we talk about these elections itself? Also being solution oriented in this our introductory speech to our speaker, former Governor Donald Duke. Please.
Well, thank you. Madam Moderator, you didn't share your name with us. Maybe I was not online when.
And I am Yar'adua Hassan. I work at the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD.
Sorry, what's your first name again?
Yes, please.
Your name again?
Yar'adua Hassan.
I didn't get it. Okay, Yar'adua, thank you. I think one of the optimistic things coming out of this elections is enthusiasm that it has generated, particularly amongst young people who, whether we like it or not, sooner than later, will take over the affairs of this country. And that's a plus. And there's been a buzz around the world globally about what would happen come February, come March, and how the nation would proceed and whether we'll be able to take our space in the Committee of Nations. Assessing INEC, one really can't assess. There's a lot of talk. It's a good thing that they're trying to embrace electronic voting and all, all the talk about beavers and all that. It's still really untested, so one cannot say with any certainty that it's a panacea for the success of these elections. I would like to go back to 2019, which was the last election that was conducted by INEC at the national level. And that left a lot of sour taste. Do not forget that 4 hours to voting, elections were postponed. And that was without consequences. I still haven't gotten over that's such a lapse where 4 hours materials have been deployed and all that, and 2 weeks prior the national chairman had said that he was ready for the elections. Then 4 hours to voting, you postpone it for another 2 weeks or thereabout. If that is still at the back of our minds, and it still brings to question whether we truly have an independent electoral body. All the promises that were made in 19 have also been made again for 23. But like I believe seeing is believing. Theoretically, everything is in place. If the Beavers works as it ought to, but it has not been tested, I thought they would have used local government elections in selected states in the 6 geopolitical zones to test the veracity of beavers and get people sort of acclimatized to it. So we're going into a blind spot in the most important election. But we have to remain eternal optimists and hope it works. A few things are happening. There's the apparent determination by the administration not to stem certain vices, like cash inducements at the point of voting and all that. Again, I hope it works. Politicians, and I'm one of them, what we do is we take the law and we see how we can manipulate the law, right, or the system. And I sometimes I think it's important that the operators of the system, INEC that is, should also play a devil's advocate on what they're doing. How do we stem politicians who would go to any extent to manipulate or compromise elections? There's a lot of talk about cyber hacking and all that. So those things have to be looked at. But, I'm pleased at the level of optimism, particularly amongst young people in this election, and I hope that their optimism is not thwarted. I'll say that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tanwa, do you want to jump in?
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. I want to also thank the organizers of this event and the invitation to be here. I think it's so apt right now, and then the fact that the young people really are taking over this election. So we're very excited that there's a lot of interest in that area. So one thing I just really want to point out, hopefully later on I'll be able to touch on particularly the topic that I wanted to speak to. But it's a very interesting election because in addition to all the usual pre-electoral issues that we tend to see, the during election issues that we see, the post-election issues we see, there's some new dynamics that have come into play as well. And we have to be thinking about surprises that are going to show up. Surprises in the sense of now that we have a different demographic of people that are going to be voting, their choices might be different from what we are thinking and what the general population is planning for. And so if there's one thing that we're worried about as security risk consultants, we're worried about the surprises that might show up all of a sudden, when people don't get the results that they're hoping for, when there's the thugs, the political thugs don't get the results that they're hoping for, when the candidates don't get the results that they're thinking that they're going to get as well. So we're definitely up in arms. I'm very curious about that. But overall, I think it's a very exciting election season coming up. The cyberspace, again, I'll delve into that topic a little bit as well, is bringing its own dynamics of the good and certainly the bad and ugly as well. So it's, again, I'm just very thankful for this opportunity, and I know that the rest of the speakers are going to also do some justice here. So thank you.
Where we start?
All right, thank you very much. I'll start by correcting the introduction. I was the principal counsel in Musa, but now I'm the partner at Metropolitan Law Firm. I practice now at Metropolitan Law Firm. Thank you very much. On my own part, I think as legal practitioners in the field, we are very excited and we're looking forward to this election. Particularly want to see how some of the new provisions, some of the absolutely new provisions in the law is going to play out. For instance, for the first time now, we're going to see INEC being empowered within 7 days after an election to declare or cancel the result of an election already declared. So we want to see how that is going to play out. We also want to see how INEC on its own can disqualify candidates now and a political party if it feels that they've not complied with the law. And to speak to what earlier speakers have spoken to, the issue of the current awareness within the election, the terrain, I don't think is new. I just feel that now more people have access to information, more people now have ability to share information. The advent of social media has come to play its role. So a lot of people are now into the election frenzy, but on the whole, I'm very optimistic that we're going to have not a perfect election, but a similarly successful election. Thank you.
Chido.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And just to say thanks to the organizers of this event for the invitation to be here. This is the kind of conversation we are supposed to be having at this very important time period in the history of this country. The former governor spoke to the importance of this election, and I'm sure we all appreciate that comment. I'll just quickly, in this introductory remark, break down my intervention into three, and one would be looking at the security situation. We still don't have any sense of clarity what's going to happen. I come from Imo State. Every day I receive calls from people who think I should know because I'm in Abuja, asking me, is this election going to hold? You hear conflicting and contradictory statements coming out about sit at home or no sit at home, or one group saying election, people should not go out to collect their PVCs because elections won't hold. So it's a month to the election, and this goes to INEC as well. Many Nigerians are still struggling to get their PVCs, which shouldn't be a month to the election. By now, what we should be thinking of is between the security, the INEC and civil society, media institutions, how to perfect the conduct of the election. My expectation is that yesterday was 25th, it's exactly a month to the elections, that INEC ought to be explaining to citizens how to go. A lot of people will go into the election not knowing what to expect. Beavers, how get their polling units and all of that. I think we still have a bit of time. It's important that we begin to reflect on that. Then there's also the sense about the enthusiasm of young people. Yeah, I think it's great, and it's wonderful what INEC is doing, but also perhaps some of the candidates also helping in terms of driving the attention or interest in the election. We hope all of this can come together to give us the eyes of the world on us. We hope we don't disappoint. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also said that maybe the Nigerian elections is actually the most important election to watch this year. and to watch this year. And the barrister just said something like, at the end we will have a perfect elections. Let me change it and tilt it towards a credible elections. Tawa, is it possible to actually have an election, at least that where the integrity quotient will be quite high, considering the level of insecurity plaguing the sixth geopolitical zone of this country?
So I think that it's absolutely possible. But what everyone's worried about, obviously, like we said, is the insecurity. What the insecurity is doing is that it's already challenging the integrity of the elections even before it happens. So, for example, we know there are over 600 different communities that have been highlighted as locations with high insecurity where they're not even sure if INEC is going to be able to set up the polling units in those areas. So that's on one hand, and that's what everyone's already concerned about. The other thing too, and you know, we're going based off of past precedents. So what is it that we've seen? This is our 7th electoral cycle. We've seen this the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So this is almost a staple in terms of what tends to happen in elections in Nigeria. The attacks on polling units, attacks at collation centers. Another thing that I also tend to be very worried about is how we always have to deploy law enforcement, military people. And I tell people this all the time, that any time military law enforcement show up in a location, fatalities are automatically going to get higher. Why? They're showing up with guns. They're showing up with bullets. So chances of someone getting killed is significantly higher when they're there. But at the same time, we know that they have to be there to prevent thugs from actually disrupting the whole situation. So we know we're entering the elections with all of these dynamics. And what we're trying to say is, you know what, at the end of the day, we recognize that there's some locations that elections might not be perfect. But then there's some others that we know, at least, you know, the votes will count. And one other thing too is when you know, we talk to people and tell them, you stay there, make sure that your votes are counted, make sure it's not disrupted. You know, on the one hand, when we talk when we talk about personal security, we tell people, you know what, go there, vote, and please carry yourself back home. So at which point do you feel the need to also play that your civic duty, stand your ground, make sure there are no disruptions, or at which point are you going to actually try to protect yourself? So there, again, loads of dynamics at play here, but I think in terms of credibility, how close can we get? Things like the introduction of BVAS obviously will help. I know one of the stories that I heard from the Osun State elections was where votes had been counted and the system captures those votes immediately. And somewhere in between, people were in the command and control center, and they started seeing those numbers changing, which means some people were there trying to change the votes, and you know how they normally do. Unfortunately for them, because it had already been logged into this system, it was impossible for them to do it. All they had to do was to go into the archive and show, look, the logs, and say this is the actual votes that came in. So whatever changes and disruptions you're doing, it's not going to work. So at least these are some of the changes that INEC, you know, like you said, has introduced, and that we're hoping will help make this a bit more credible.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll get to the barrister immediately. A double-barreled question for you. Yes, you spoke about innovation in the electoral act, which is quite interesting, and it's a positive when you look at it. And Tanwa spoke also about the BVAS, which is like a fantastic machine. It's not a voting machine, it's a bimodal voter accreditation system. So what it does is that it captures your biometrics. So this time around, you are not dealing with the PVCs as what is authenticating you as a voter. But your PVC is just coming to show that, oh yes, you have the PVC, you are presenting it, but does it really belong to Hidayat? That is what the BVAS does. Because either through your fingerprints or your facial recognition, your irises, at least even I've grown fatter since when I first registered, my eyes have not changed. Then that is when it is ticked off. It's ticked off and you can confirm to vote. And when it doesn't tick off, green, and you even vote, it remains invalid. So it's a fantastic instrument. General has popped in. I'll come back to you later. Now, barrister, Tanwa said 600 communities with huge likelihood that they will not be able to set up polling units in that area. We already have fears about the accessibility of voters to the polling unit, the security of voting materials, and even election officials. In such a situation, what kind of constitutional logjam can actually be triggered? Even when you go back and you look at the constitutional provision that actually speaks to how winners emerge in Nigeria. How do we call it win? Please enlighten us.
Thank you very much. So this question speaks to the requirement, the constitutional requirement to declare a winner. Now, if you have this massive security situation scattered around the country, it might affect the issue of having at least 25% in two-thirds of the state for the presidency, or 25% in two-thirds of the local governments in the gubernatorial election. Now, this is what this speaks to. And I don't think that INEC is unaware of this. I don't think INEC is unaware of this. And I'm sure the INEC people are not here. I'm sure they will have put in place some of their measures administratively to ensure that people are able to vote. At the last election, I recall that some people were allowed to vote. Polling units were set up at IDP camps, for example, and people were allowed access to vote. Now, the introduction of the beavers you mentioned, right, has also triggered a new provision in the new Electoral Act. That is the definition of what we used to know as overvoting. Yeah. Before this act, overvoting used to be when you have votes declared that are above the numbers of the registered voters at a polling unit. Now, with the introduction of beavers, it then means that you can now peg accreditation. So overvoting now means when you have votes above the numbers of persons who were accredited to vote at a polling unit. So these are the kind of innovations that I feel have come into the Electoral Act and electoral system that, again, will not guarantee a perfect election, but will guarantee us a measure of fair and credible election. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think to add to that is also what is called the margin of lead now. Previously, the margin of lead will be maybe the total number of registered voters. That's how it will be determined. Now is the total number of accredited voters, not even PVC collected. General Dambazao, you are welcome, sir. Now, we are talking in terms of security at the moment. What do you think can be done urgently to restore law and order in all parts of the country for elections to hold on one hand? On the other hand, how do we ensure that the security agencies themselves conduct themselves within the remit of the law in all their activities during polling? General.
Oh yeah. Hi, Hidayat. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, sir. Fine, sir.
Yeah. I didn't know that that was meant for me. Sorry about that. Good morning. Well, in terms of security, first, I believe that the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces has said it severally, that all he wants is to ensure that there is free and fair elections. And you cannot have free and fair elections if there is no adequate security anyway. So you must be sure of that. Secondly, the security agencies themselves, in particular the police that has the primary responsibility, has also said it severally, and also the military has said it, that they are going to provide adequate security for the elections. And if I'm not mistaken, the INEC too has mentioned that they are ready. And by the way, there's interagency grouping which created a kind of platform for all the security agencies, including relevant ministries, that is Ministry of Interior Police Affairs who are members to look at issues pertaining the conduct of elections and the necessary security. So I want to believe that 1 month to the elections, things would have taken shape in terms of security. And I want to emphasize too that this election is not only the 799, but I believe that it's an election that is so important because it will serve as a bridge between the transition period towards consolidation of democracy in Nigeria. So I think everybody is taking that serious. The issue of security during elections is not new. Some years back, our focus was on the Northeast. Northeast appears to be calmer now. Now the focus now is in the Southeast and some parts of Northwest where you have banditry, kidnapping, so on. But in particular, the Southeast, whereby the proscribed group IPOP has sworn that elections will not take place in that region. So those are the kind of challenges, and I'm sure the security agencies must have done their homework very well in order to tackle that. And of course, the police, like I said, has the primary responsibility. The military has limited responsibility in terms of elections security. But I'm sure using the platform of that interagency platform, they'll be able to handle the necessary security issues. Certainly there are challenges security-wise, but those challenges are not challenges that are unsurmountable. And every election has its own challenges security-wise, not just from 1999, but even from the First Republic. And I'm sure that people will use their experience and knowledge to know how to deal with this equally. But the other aspect of it too is that some of these security issues or security challenges are creation of politicians themselves, because where they, go for politics of ethnicity, politics of religion, politics of regionalism, those kind of politics are divisive, and they tend to create tension among electorates. So, and I think the politicians too should be able to look at that in the best interest of the country. But by and large, I believe that there will be elections, 2023 elections, and I believe that the elections will be free and fair as far as the security is concerned. And I believe that the security agencies are ready to handle the security situation as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General. And he has assured us and reminded us that in place is an interagency consultative committee on election security, which is actually, I think it has more than 25 members of not just security agencies, but even the FCC and ICPC have been added to lead towards securing law and order. And it doesn't work just at the national level, it also is replicated at the state and local government level. So he has given us an advocacy point and where we should actually be looking at. And thank you. Chidu, so in these elections, disinformation is a very important one, fake news. In fact, for some people, we are positing that compared to 2019, the role fake news is playing in these elections is actually bigger and greater and might be a determining factor. Can you give us a short overview, in just like 3 minutes, of the disinformation ecosystem in these elections?
Thank you. Well, I think we're in for a big challenge. the expanding influence and reach of social media, digital technology will definitely have impact on this election. And that's why it's important that both the security ecosystem and the INEC as the arbiters of this election would need to work together so that people have a system to verify, to check information on the go. If you check the websites of different news platforms in the country, just Google INEC and election information. One of the two top issues, violence and fake news, it's what INEC is reporting that is of the biggest concern for it. And your organization, you try to hide behind the scene to say you work for CDD as opposed to you are the director of CDD. The CDD has done tremendous work in these areas, and also the organization has highlighted the importance of fake news and disinformation as being central to this election. Yesterday I was at an event organized by the International Press Center of the election. A lot is expected of journalists. There is very little law enforcement agencies INEC can do other than to keep just providing literacy opportunities for people to understand. My fear and concern going to this election, this is something INEC needs to pay attention to. Provide an avenue, a platform for people where people can check, because by the time the elections start coming in, you see all kinds of results, cloning. People would clone INEC websites, clone newspaper websites, and that poses a security threat, because then by the time people go get certain information and run with it, and INEC says, oh, that's not the right information, nobody would agree that our candidate hasn't been cheated out of this election. So as much as we're going into this election hoping to have free and fair election, looking forward to people going out and vote, it's also important that transparency and accountability of the process, and this is where INEC would really need to invest heavily. How do we, whether you want to use the electronic or social media or the traditional media, in ensuring that citizens know where to go, what to expect, provide the INEC portal, the authentic one, if it means sending it out on WhatsApp or other social media platforms where people can verify information. But also there is a sense, and perhaps it's too late in the day, there is a sense in which we adopt this fire brigade approach to the event. And hopefully, as we look forward to elections, even though we haven't started the 2023 election, or we look forward to the 2027 election, now is the time to begin that process of educating citizens of how to verify news, verify information, so that anything you get, you can cross-check. The politicians won't do that for us. Their purpose is to distort, to disinform, to get enough votes, but then they will do anything for them is by any means necessary to win the votes. It's the electoral umpire, the security services, those whose concerns are to monitor the process, to invest heavily in this. Much of the work your organization does, and mine as well, is in the area of media and information literacy. People need to, citizens need to be trained in how to fact-check information, why it's important to check whatever information is available, who authored it, where is it coming from, what's the purpose of this. Maybe we will have to find a way to integrate all of this as we look forward to information, look forward to the election. But it's fake news is going to be a big part of this process. How we deal with it will be a combination of factors. INEC needs to work with the media. It's important to get editors on board. Some of the media houses are owned by politicians. Some people filter the information they get, some if it suits them. So one person is terrorist, another person freedom fighter. You see two news organizations reporting about a particular person, and in this report they are painting the person as a saint. In this other newspaper or television station, they are painting the person as a sinner. So at the end of the day, it's the kind of knowledge and information that citizens have that will determine how credible and fair this election is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I go to former Governor Donaldo. Please, can you speak to us about the role of politicians in fostering peaceful elections in this circle?
First of all, let me apologize. I'll be leaving the panel very shortly, but and I also want to thank my fellow panelists for their contributions thus far. You know, there's a certain level of naivety that I find quite charming when it comes to electioneering in Nigeria. We all postulate free and fair, and how we hope people do this and do that. It's the reverse in the field. Politicians will do whatever they have to do or whatever they think they ought to do to win an election. There's so much invested in an election that nobody's going to leave it to chance. And that's why I postulated earlier when I spoke that INEC has to play the devil's advocate. What would politicians be doing? Look, there are people who have invested sums of money to undo the Beavers system. They know who the manufacturers are. They have tried to see how they can hack into the system and all that. So it is one thing to put in place a robust system, but also have a counter organization or a counter format to see how you can undo that system, because that's how the minds of politicians work. I listened to the general. Yes, it is true. It's good. The security system would, at best as possible, will be in place. But hey, you're talking about an election that about 50 million people will be participating. It's very difficult to police a system like that, particularly in the remote areas. In my part of the country, where you have creeks and all that, how many security agents do you have in those creeks? There are some places that are so secluded, and that is where vote manipulation takes place. And this is what it's all about, vote manipulation. So, and again, I advocated that INEC ought to have tested this system in a number of local government elections in association with the state electoral bodies in different geopolitical zones. So you take two states in each geopolitical zone and see how it works, see what can be done, what is being done or can be done to undermine the system. That hasn't been done, at least to the best of my knowledge. I know they'll say they did it in Ondo State and this and that, but it's not robust enough. It should be done throughout the country. So largely we're going into this elected blind and hoping for the best. That's a naivety I don't get. But keep our fingers crossed and hope that it works for the best. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll have to leave now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for joining and giving us your words. And I think we are also picking a lot, which I believe we would take away as part of our focus at the end of this election. We still have 1 month. How many? 29 days. It's a long time.
Yes, we do. I hope we can do something and look at it, because honestly, I know and I've heard that there are people trying to undermine whatever system is in place, and that's what politicians do. It's for the electoral body, that's INEC, to ensure that they minimize it. And it's not unique to Nigeria; it's a global thing. I mean, we all look up to the United States as the bastion of democracy, but you could see that the system, there was a grand plot to undermine the system there, and therefore we should be doing that more, because the desperation is even more on this part in our country than elsewhere in the world. There are people who make a living of politics, so they will beg, borrow, steal, do whatever they ought to do or whatever they can do to undermine the system in their favor. I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
panelists, I'm going to throw a question at every one of us, and this is a very important question. It has to do with the role polling will likely play in these elections. In previous elections, we have seen polls, but politicians have kept their polls to themselves. But it's fast becoming a strategy, not just in Nigeria elections, but in African elections. The Americans, they always did that and make it open a strategy. Now we are seeing polls. We are seeing polls predicting win for different candidates or even projections. What role do we think this will play post-election, and how do we think it will impact the acceptability of the outcome or otherwise in the forthcoming elections? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's a critical part of elections, and it's good that the country is becoming more used to that tradition of polls, but we haven't gotten there yet. There is a lot of credibility issues, a lot of even the question of authenticity. Some of these polls, I think what we should look forward to is going forward, and I don't think we will get it as far as this election is concerned, because there is always two parts to the whole question of polling. You do the poll before the election, and then you do the assessment post-elections to see whether what your numbers told you are actually correct. I don't know how far we can get in terms of the polls that we are seeing. Many of them are coming so close to the election. It almost gives you a sense that these are things that are hurriedly built to satisfy the interest of peculiarities of a particular political party or candidate. But I think it's something, as far as I'm concerned, I think it's something for the future. That perhaps by the time we are through with this election, ahead of 2027, once the candidates start emerging their polls that are conducted to see what Nigerians are saying and how that reflects on the outcomes of both primary elections and general election. The only danger in all of this, as important as the poll, the issue of polling is also the way people respond to it. A lot of people may take the poll numbers or results as actually the results of the general election themselves. So if your candidate doesn't, if things don't go in favor of your candidate as they are in the polls, there is a sense that you've been rigged out or you've been deliberately shortchanged, which shouldn't be so. What that means, therefore, is that there is need for the pollsters themselves, the institutions, organizations, and even the media to educate people. Because even if you conduct a poll today to say, look at the panelists and say this and this and this, in 5-10 minutes the situation will change. Ahead of the fact that you conducted a poll 3 months before the election doesn't mean that people can't change their mind. Circumstances or situations can't force people to change their mind. So it's important that side by side with the exercise of polling, that there is serious mass education in the country, that this is just a reflection of the views of people. People's views can change in an instant. As they say in Nigeria, 1 hour is too long as far as party politics is concerned, not to talk of 1 week or 1 month. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tawa.
So I think if there's one relic that was left over after 2019 is that we don't believe in these polls anymore. I remember vividly during the 2019 elections on Twitter, it showed the president's opponent. I don't even remember who it is I was running, but I just remember that it showed that that person was the one everyone was going to vote for. And then on election day, it was a landslide against the opponent. And so, everybody came on like Twitter mocking a lot of the Nigerians on Twitter, saying it should be your Twitter poll showed this other person winning. So I don't think we've forgotten that, and I think if anything, we're all very cautious about these polls, and it also shows us that the dynamics on the ground are completely different from people who are actually voting. I don't know about you, but I've never voted in any polls online, so I don't know who they're getting their polling information from. That's on one hand. On the other hand, polling and the results that people display actually provide a bit of there's a reverse psychology involved in that. So it goes both ways. Number one, if I put out this poll that says everywhere it's showing that, party A is winning, you as the voter might feel demoralized. You might think, there's no point. I'm just going to go and vote for party A and throw my votes away because there's no need. And then you might decide to sit it out. Or it could make you think, what? Party A? Never. We must all go and vote and make sure that it's party B that emerges as the winner. So it does have sort of its psychological angle to that. But like I said, I think at this point, a lot of us know not to really take these polls as seriously anymore.
I think that the problem with polls is deeply seated problem as a country. We have a problem with data management, and polls, are accurate when they reflect the true data they rely on. So until we fix our problem with data management, we'll have it not next to impossible really to have accurate polls. But there's a flip side to it. The flip side to it is this: if you have someone with a localized opinion in the sense that he has not had the opportunity to see the other side of the opinions or the other side of the campaigns. For example, practical example, someone in Kano, for example, will feel, this candidate is going to have a landslide in the election. Because every house he goes to in Kano says they support that candidate. The candidate's banners are all over the place. His campaign rallies are filled to the brim. So his opinion is based on that reality. So when you now see a poll saying that, this other party, this other candidate from the other side of the divide is likely to win, it kind of psychologically prepares this person with a localized opinion with the possibility that there could be an alternative at the end of the election. And this some way, comes to play in managing tensions after election. But really, we need to solve our data management problem before we can begin to have accurate polls. Thank you.
Thank you very much. General Dambazao, do you want to chip in on that?
About polls, I'm not sure if those conducting polls actually do the right thing in terms of the sample they collect, where they collect the sample, and all the processes of conducting polls. So, like the last speaker mentioned, I find it very difficult myself to, give any attention to any of those polls, because I saw a poll some few weeks back. Immediately, without even asking anybody, I was able to decipher who was behind that poll. So I don't think it reflects the reality. Secondly, the maturity of our voters, most of whom are in the rural areas, has not reached the level that they will even understand some of the questions being asked. So the validity of the result certainly will be questionable. But the reality of that is on the day of voting. If people are allowed to come out to exercise their voting rights, use their PVCs, and the votes are allowed to be counted to reflect the actual voting pattern. That is the day that everybody will know who wins and who loses. But some of those polls certainly have some influence over people. They may raise the rate of voter apathy, because somebody who is ignorant of what is happening may say, well, what's the need? This reflection of the result, we have even won, so I don't even need to go. So it's even against the person he is supporting. I'm not saying that our people are that stupid, but certainly there are some people who will look at it from that angle. But I don't take polls serious. Our polls here, I don't take them serious. I think what we should concentrate is to ensure that there's level playing field, to ensure that elections are free and fair, to the extent that people are able to exercise their voting rights, to ensure that nobody is allowed to intimidate anybody during elections, and to encourage people who have their PVCs to come out and vote accordingly. And I think that will show how serious our democracy is and how sustainable it's going to be. But these polls are just there to confuse people. Some of them, we know that they are being sponsored by people in order to, play some psychological game on Nigerian people. So that's my comment on it.
Thank you very much. This issue of polling is quite important, and we hope people will help us to take it back to their friends. Polling are important, but the methodology of the polls are also critical. And we have also seen that in previous elections, in fact, if you look at the US 2016 elections, it projected Hillary Clinton will win. But Donald Trump won, such that even Gallup started querying the effectiveness of polling, and they had to go change their strategy. So it might work, it might not work, but it should be something that we should not allow to throw this country into post-election violence itself. Now, back to the barrister. So, barrister, tell us, do you think our judiciary and our legal practitioners do for these elections? Or do they understand the Electoral Act, the INEC lines, and how it's married to the Constitution in such a way that in our usual litigious way, we would be able to give a semblance of, what do we call it, justice being done post-elections?
Thank you very much. I'm of the opinion that as legal practitioners, there is a class of practitioners that are experts in handling these election issues. And this set of practitioners are always ready when it comes to election practice. But you see, whenever there is an amendment like this, it always takes practitioners, with surprise, particularly some of the issues as to disqualification, non-competence of your processes because you have overlooked one issue here and there. Now, I'll speak to some of these issues. For example, in 2015, there was a decision of the Supreme Court, Dangana against Musa. So practically every lawyer that worked on a pre-election matter or election petition had a copy of the case. And so anywhere you go, you will now hear this chorus, lawyers' choruses that a candidate can always question the nomination of another candidate, even though he was in another political party, right? Even though the Electoral Act has then in Section 84 says you have to be an aspirant, I mean that probably you'll have contested the same primary election. But for that decision, a lot of those cases went through, and some of them were successful. And when you look at the subsequent amendment, first to the Constitution, the constitutional amendment now had to clarify. In Section 185 that look, for a pre-election, if this has to be a pre-election matter, this is what a pre-election matter is. Either you are an aspirant, complain about a fellow aspirant, in which case you have contested the same election, the same primary election, or you are an aspirant, you are complaining about the conduct of INEC, or a political party, you are complaining about the conduct of a political party. So that brought in another level of sanity in the litigations, the proceedings and all that. And we saw that play out in 2019. So 2019, we didn't experience the kind of surprises we saw with the proceedings in 2015. Now there is a new amendment, and I can bet you that a lot of people will still be surprised by some of the not hidden, but some of the silent provisions in this amendment. For example, you can question the qualification of a candidate, but now that qualification has to relate to a constitutional eligibility issue, right? You now come and say, for example, you rely on the cases, the Labour Party cases, for example, the locus class, where you say, once you have been excluded, I have a case now, I can tender out the whole election. But now this Electoral Act is saying that you can't do that. If you have to rely on lawful exclusion, you have to have given INEC a notice of about 6 months, signed by your chairman and your secretary. So on the whole, there are a lot of silent provisions in the Act that I think will create some twist here and there in this election. But on the whole, lawyers are always ready. We are not just always ready, we are always excited by the prospects of post-election litigation. Yeah. That answer.
Lawyers are always ready. They are always ready to make money. As they are making money and making the process very, very onerous for all of us. Thank you very much. I'll use the opportunity to open it up to take questions from the audience before going back to the panel. So, but let's take from
to find out perhaps the legal luminary can help us in terms of, and I hope Dan Bazal is still around, consequences for one election security crisis and breakdown of law and order, and this goes to politicians who break the law. Why is it not possible? And I know perhaps you can help in terms of the whole argument about whether to have special election court. Why is it that electoral offenses, there is no punishment? We've now been able to turn the corner as far as that's concerned. Thank you.
So there are provisions in your electoral act that attempt, I would say attempt, because they have flip sides. They attempt to punish or provide consequences, particularly to politicians when they heat up the process, particularly at the point of announcing results and all that. And that provision is the provision that says that INEC can, on its own, INEC can, within 7 days of announcement of result, look at the process and declare such result as invalid on its own. Before, politicians just need to push themselves across the line and get the results announced, and they will tell you, we'll sort the result in court. But now with this provision, INEC can look at it and say, okay, look, the returning officer who declared this result declared it under duress. So for us as INEC, we have looked at it. We are not comfortable with this result, so we are going to declare it null and void. Those kind of provisions have been put in place to check this kind of things. And again, you see, this advocacy needs to be taken to the doorsteps of politicians. That's the honest truth. The outcome of an election and how people behave after that outcome is largely dependent on the character of the politicians. I'll give you an example, probably abroad, so that politicians at home will not feel I'm speaking to them. Look at the outcome of the election that ousted Donald Trump out of office. I personally believe that would possibly not have happened if possibly a Senator McCain, for example. If possibly Senator McCain was the one that had lost that election, I don't perceive or conceive seeing a McCain, prompting people to break the law, prompting people to occupy the legislative houses. So largely, the way our politicians perceive themselves, the strength of their characters, particularly to be able to handle defeat, will go a long way in stemming some of these crises that we'll have after elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Dambaza. So can we start seeing hands up? 2, 3. No female. Please ask questions. I'll start with, please read.
My question is a simple one. I want to ask, what are the critical factors that are going to challenge or be a challenge to this 2023 election result?
Please, can you repeat the question?
Yes. I said, what are the critical factors that are going to challenge or be a challenge to this 2023 election result?
Well, I have two questions, and these questions I think are directed at INEC. The first one has to do with the last point that you raised, the diet, concerning the role of polling, in elections. Closely related to that also is the role of religious prophecies, and the impact that has doctrinally in systems of those who favor particular political candidates. My question is this. Now that we see that polling results are being doctored, and in some instances they are being sponsored, what is INEC thinking about doing to prevent this kind of thing in terms of setting standards, and then in terms of going back to see whether the standards were followed in coming out with the results of those polls, which will impact belief in the election outcomes? Because this also will have effect on post-election stability. So is INEC thinking along that direction? And then the second question goes to the point that His Excellency, former Governor Donald Duke made, and I like his courage. He's always very point blank and straightforward about how politicians in Nigeria play their politics. He made the point that politicians are heavily invested in these elections, and so they will do what they have to do, including investing in compromising the beavers. Is INEC aware of this? What is INEC doing to ensure that that is mitigated? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Noel. My question goes to the general. So, considering the security challenges facing Nigeria, especially in this current administration, how sure are we that the electorate, their lives will be protected during the election? Because we have seen in this current administration that the government has, for the past 7 years, has failed to secure the lives, to protect the lives of the citizens. So how sure are we that the citizens' lives will be protected during the election period? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll take another one.
My name is Shehu, the liaison officer of the National Council of Nigeria. According to Mark Marshall, he said, and I quote, that the world is a global village, which means anywhere in this world can communicate. Now, the social media, I want to talk about the social media. It's going to be a very big problem when it comes to fake news. Now, in the other media, just like NBS, National Broadcasting Commission, they regulate the news content of every media, be it newspaper, radio, and television. But coming to the social media, there is no regulatory body. Unlike US, Germany, they have a regulatory body that monitor everything post on the air before you post anything, it is regulated. There are some things you cannot post. My question goes to the government. What are they doing? Can they establish anybody to regulate the social media? Thank you very much.
I'll come back to the panelists to take each of these questions. If we can do 2 minutes, that will be fine.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I think the very first question is poignant in many ways. We can, in terms of the election's credibility and outcome, look at two. So one is the process, and one ultimately is the outcome. And again, this goes to our colleague and friend from the National Orientation Agency posed this question to INEC. I'm not sure there is an INEC rep here. As active as I am in civil society and the media, if you ask me now, say, what is the position as far as electronic transmission of results or how results will be transmitted, I don't think I have an answer. I don't know if any of us has an answer. We'll be happy to hear that. So this question of how do we know how the results are going to be put together and announced, and then so that speaks to the credibility. I don't have an answer to the person that asked the question, and I hope it's something that we can address. The whole thing about prophecy, it's hard to answer that. Protection of voters, I spoke to that when I made my initial contribution, because in many places, apart from the election being militarized, when people see tanks and mobile policemen in there, nobody wants to come out and vote. So voter suppression, intimidation takes various forms. At the end of the day, it may just be the announcement that, oh, don't come out to vote. So there are conflicting stories or reports. You don't know whether to believe the vigilantes or the state security officials or the local crazy terrorist groups or bandits who issue statements. Going forward, it's important that government and institutions and agencies come out deliberately to make pronouncements that this is where we stand on this and this and this. There is a way citizens need reassurance going into the election. Somebody talks about protecting or regulating social media. I don't think you're very correct in terms of your reference to some of the developed countries. But nobody regulates anything. Maybe in some places like China and North Korea. No, in the United States, in Canada, which I'm familiar with, nobody regulates anything. There may be policies, laws that says you can't do certain things because then it infringes on the rights of people, and you could actually you can be sued by a certain person. But in terms of regulation, you can't really regulate social media. You can't legislate yourself out of the crisis, so to say, of what social media poses. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of media literacy, engaging citizens, empowering them, their capacity to understand the nuances of new media technology. That's, for me, the way to go. Thank you.
Very quickly, on the challenges, I think that's what we've been talking about, and panelists have been trying to provide solutions. One of the key areas that I think we've not said so much about is the issue of legislation. Yes, legislation. It's very important that we appreciate the fact that legislation has a whole role to play in this addressing some of these challenges, and we can see our movement from the 2010 to 2017 constitutional amendment to the 2022 amendment to the Electoral Act. So we are trying to address these challenges, or the people there are trying to, but there's a lot of room and a lot of things that still need to be done. The role of religious prophecies, I will skip that one. And about the election. Is INEC aware of the attempt to compromise election? INEC will speak to that, but I have heard them severally. saying that they are aware people are trying to compromise their systems, they are doing all they can and all that. But really, the best person to speak to this will be INEC. And how sure are we that the electorate will be protected? Of course, General will be more appropriate person to speak to this. Then can social media be regulated, or the regulation of social media? I think what has been mistaken here for regulation of social media in the Western world or the developed places is that there are regulations for tech giants and operators of social media. There are regulations for that. And because those regulations are there, these tech giants who handle social media platforms are also trying to be careful. So at some point, they know that a content is probably could be inappropriate, but they will leave that decision to take. And they will ask you to be able to determine that you have the capacity to make that decision. They'll ask you, are you 18 years plus, for example. For some platforms, they even give you the option to report some of these publications. Is it offensive? Is it offensive because it's violent, because it contravenes some of your beliefs and all that? So really, there are regulations for operators of social media. But to operate this space, it's really going to be difficult. Even in Nigeria here, it will be difficult because you have a major constitutional hurdle you will have to cross to do that. That's the freedom of expression. It's difficult but to operate, to regulate the operators. I think even 2 years ago, we saw an attempt by the Nigerian government to do that with their interaction with Twitter. I don't know how successful that is, but basically I think that's what is attainable around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that is just the minimum standards. They are community standards. It's just that they are flagrantly disregarded with some of these tech platforms here in Nigeria. But Nigeria also has got a Cyber Crimes Act 2015 that makes it an offense to peddle fake news. It's just that the implementation of the act is quite problematic, and even when they do it, at times we civil rights activists will say that they are violating people's freedom. But there needs to be a balance, like what they have in Germany, which our friends is actually referring to. When the German government, when they flag the content, the platforms do have a responsibility to take it down. And in all the elections from Brazil to Mexico to Kenya, these Kenyan elections also, they had this kind of MOU with the election management body, which gives them the mandate to remove content in like 12 hours maximum. But we are not saying that 3 days into the elections, but Meta has actually done better in this electoral cycle compared to TikTok, Twitter, Google, and other platforms. And Chido actually peddled misinformation here to say he doesn't even know how electronic transmission of results works. And I think there are two that we really need to highlight here. By the electronic transmission of results, what I need is basically saying is that after polling, they used to have this form before, 60 or what do they call it? It's called the citizens form. They put it and they paste it on the wall after elections, after polling. But now they have like an 8A. Immediately you write the results, you then scan it with the beavers. You send it into what they call the INEC result viewing platform, IRED, and immediately all of us can see the results. And what that does is basically to be like a deterrence to people who want to change the vote, because it's already there. You can see it if from 200 from polling unit A in AMAC, whatever, Ward B in Abuja, then it becomes 500 when they are tagged. You can go back and check that this is valid. And I think these are the forms of innovation, but how it will work, we do not know. We have to manage our expectations while actually being very, very optimistic in these elections. And it's also important to highlight that election is a stakeholders activity. It's not just INEC, it's not just the security agencies, it's also about us. I'm not going to encourage people to go out in the midst of insecurity, but we are also the ones who keep security in our home communities. And I think on that note, I'll turn to Tanwa, who has got a 10-minute presentation, but I'm going to make it to 7 minutes because we all want to. We agreed this event we finish at 12 to have 16 minutes to speak. and we need to round up on how we can actually safely secure this election. So solutions coming up. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I know one of the questions I think the gentleman asked about, will citizens' lives be protected? And maybe hopefully after I'm done with this, I might be able to address or answer that question a little bit. But so specifically, I'm talking about strategies and measures for ensuring peace and stability during and after the 2023 elections. I know that was something that they wanted us to talk about. And I also thought it was important that we put some context into this as well. So next slide, please. One thing, I was at an event earlier last year. This event had a lot of high-profile Nigerians, politicians. And I remember sitting there and thumping, the table. I said, listen, all of you here, just so you know, 2022, which was last year, is going to be the year that reports the highest number of fatalities in Nigeria, because the year before elections, more people die. And I remember saying that, and I was challenging them and saying, listen, how are you going to try to stop that from happening? Well, one thing we've already seen is there's already been a significant increase in the number of fatalities within this, what we call electioneering period, than we've seen already in the previous year. So it's something that happens all the time. It's definitely something that we need to watch and try to work on. Overall, in Nigeria, conflict increased in 2022, and in the Northwest, particularly, pretty bad. But then Kaduna and Borno State actually reduced in terms of incidents that were happening. Is it really because there's better security? Maybe, or maybe the problem just changed location, right? Because now we're seeing a spike in the North Central. Next, please. I think the real thing we need to ask here as well is what could disrupt the peace and stability of elections. Next, now disruptions occur along the three different phases of that sort of election cycle. So you have the pre-election issues, like I said earlier, the during the election issues, and then the post-election. Next, some of the pre-electoral issues that we're already seeing. Loads of arms and weapons are floating around. What that means is people are getting killed. We've seen a lot of assassinations already. We see attacks on INEC facilities. This was one of the INEC facilities that was burnt. Here's my question. This happens every 4 years. You think by now they would have put a fire station near all the INEC offices or something? Like, we see this all the time. Anyway, these are the issues we're dealing with. Disruptive campaign rallies. There was a campaign rally where dynamite went off. There was a campaign rally where, fights break out. We see this a lot. Attacks on security personnel, particularly in the southeast. But this even started before the elections. Now we're going to the elections. We're going to need more security personnel. Are they now going to also be targeted as well? INEC logistical challenges. Pre-election has to do with collection of PVCs. And this is, again, one of the things that could disrupt the stability of the elections. People are already upset. I don't know if you've seen those memes that have been going around where they ask you, which queue are you queuing for this year? Is it fuel queue, PVC queue, or Q4? What was the third one? Right? So there's a lot of stress already and strain amongst people. Next slide. For during elections, obviously we see attacks on polling units. I remember this particular picture. It was one of the polling units in the 2019 elections. I don't know, the thugs there just, maybe it was maybe it's a heavy PDP community and the APC people didn't want it and went and scattered all the ballots and everything that's there. We see this all the time. Even when the policemen there were overwhelmed. Now, this is, as security practitioners, one of the things that we're really worried about with Lagos State. If anybody knows, Lagos State people think is automatically an APC state. There's some heavy pockets of PDP locations there. And what we've seen in past elections is those locations are targeted by they're targeted by a lot of the thugs because they know that they're going to vote for opposition and they're not having it. In fact, in the elections last year, I hear the governor actually only won with 600,000 votes. 600,000 votes in a state of 20 million people. Do you think it was really the voice of the people that let that governor emerge? And there were so many places where people couldn't actually vote. So these are some of the during election issues that we tend to see. Logistical challenges, I think Governor Donald Duke mentioned that earlier, where INEC, people were waiting at polling units. They hadn't arrived with the materials that were needed. So these are the issues that we're going into. Next, please. For post-election, and post-election is really where, if we do like a green, orange, and red, post-election is really where the red is. This is where things can go upside down. Now, when we tell, like some of the businesses that we consult for, some of them have just said, we're removing our people. We just don't even want to know what's going to happen. We'll come back after things stabilize. And usually as evacuation contractors, they will tell you, listen, the best time to leave is before. Because when things happen, after that, we cannot guarantee you anything. So in terms of the really high risk portion of the elections, it's really the post-elections, which is all about how are people going to react to it. And this is where we're really worried. What tends to happen during post-elections, the collation centers get attacked, people try to change results, etc. It's one of the issues that we're looking at. Next, please. So in addition to all these things I've mentioned, there are actually some other unique threats to 2023 elections. We call them hybrid threats. Next. First of all, is the high insecurity. I mentioned this earlier. So it was a This Day article that came out a few weeks back, and it said that there were 18 states. These are really hot spots in terms of insecurity, high insecurity. 18 different states were tagged. There were 90 local government areas. There were 686 communities where they said there's serious insecurity there, and we don't know how INEC is going to make it to these areas. Now, at the end of the elections, if people are not really able to vote in these places, can we still come with our full chest and say it was a free and fair election? Maybe not. And this is what we're a little worried about. Also, high insecurity. We know that back then, Northeast Borno State was where we were worried. In fact, it was because of the insurgency in the Northeast that it was postponed for a couple of days. I think the 2015. Yes. So, but then now, it's all over. In the Northwest now, apparently Zamfara has taken the place of Borno State, what Borno was during that last two elections. We also have issues now in the Southeast that wasn't there before. Now it's a major challenge. And what we're seeing is that out of all those communities that were tagged as highly insecure, 90% of them were actually up north. 10% in the southern area. So again, how will the northerners feel after the elections? Will they feel that their voices really were heard? They got to cast their votes. And if they don't feel that, we could start seeing some electoral violence as well. Next, now cyberspace, major issue. Disinformation and misinformation. How many of you know the difference between the two? Pretty much, don't worry, let me school you a bit. So bottom line, one is intentional, one is unintentional. Okay, so we're seeing both of them at play. Whether you're intentionally sharing unintentional information, that's on you, but it's an issue. Deep fake is another thing that has emerged in this last couple of years as well. What that means is that a person can be talking and they're going to change the audio and make it seem like the person is saying something else, which is what we saw recently when there was a video that showed Elon Musk saying that he was supporting Peter Obi. It was a deep fake video, which is someone had just changed his mouth to say something else. And this could incite violence. All you have to do, for example, is maybe change someone's mouth, one of the candidates, to say something wrong, about religion. And you know how we take our religion in this country, all hell will break loose. So these are issues that we're really worried about and we're watching very closely. Influencer campaigning is also a big thing. Influencers now, which means you, me, we have just as much power as actual politicians. So what if I decide to say something now? Someone told me the other day, WizKid posted something about let all these old men die off or something if it's the last thing I do. And he was referring to the election. I don't know if anyone saw that. So again, he's an influencer. What happens when these people start saying things? Let's not negate the power of influencers. Look at what Davido was able to do in Osun State. A lot of it had to do with him and that young vote. So that's another thing. And then election hacking and interference. I want to delve into that a bit more. Next slide. We saw it in Ghana. So in 2016, the website of Ghana's election committee was hit by a cyber attack. The commission said that there was an attempt to put up fake results, but that failed, thankfully. Then in Kenya, in the just concluded elections 2022, there were they reported that there were 200 hacking attempts made at their election results within 24 hours. 200 attempts. Even here in Nigeria, September 2022, our Ekiti and Osun State, INEC said the results viewing portal was experienced several cyber attacks from hackers across the world, and then he was quoted as saying some of them originated from Asia. But online, this is a globalized nation that we live in right now. These are the challenges that we're dealing with as we're going into 2023 elections. And even as we adopt some of these sort of technical means, which help us get more credible elections, but they come with their own challenges as well. Next, please. So what is that, the issues with that, tackling or meddling with the results could instigate conflict. Obviously corrupting the data is an issue. Bottom line, it undermines the legitimacy and the integrity of the election. So next, what really threatens election and peace and stability is when the election outcome is not supported by the vast majority of people. And this is what I meant earlier when I said that we need to prepare for surprises. The vast majority of people are going to think a certain candidate will win. What happens when it's an upset? The vast majority of people are expecting an announcement of the president. What happens when it's inconclusive? So that's what we need to start preparing ourselves for, because more than likely we're seeing things tip in that direction. Okay. So what do we do? What can we do? There are a couple of things we can do. These are just a few. I can give you a myriad. In fact, INEC has their own list of things to make it better. CDD has put out numerous articles about how to make this thing better. So I'm talking on a tactical level. I'm talking about during the elections. I'm talking about post-elections. Some things that probably should have already been done by now. An assessment of all these high-profile, in terms of high-risk polling units. What do you do with that? You identify those areas. You reinforce the amount of security personnel that can be there. I think I read somewhere two things that the Nigerian police were doing. Number one is that the IG really circulated these documents to the policemen. It's about the SOPs for conducting elections, really trying to reinforce the need for them to, do the right thing, the need for them to protect, citizens and not use these live bullets. Hopefully they give them rubber bullets instead so that you don't have needless deaths, right? So, identifying those polling units. Another thing I saw is that they said they weren't really going to use these sort of vigilantes and regional or state security outfits. But really, let's be honest, there are a lot of these locations where there's no police presence. In fact, I'm surprised how INEC can make it to some communities and yet NEPA, PHCN doesn't know how to access those same communities, right? There are some communities, there's no police presence, there's no governance, but INEC will find those places. So what then happens with them? Why don't we have those local sort of security vigilantes and let them be the ones who are standing the guard to protect people's rights to votes? I think they also need to be included, but maybe there's a discussion for 4 years from now. Bottom line, though, is that they can still be used as what we call force multipliers to augment the policemen that are already there. Cracking down on hate speech. I know Barrister kind of mentioned that as well. Another major thing is quick response around hotspot areas. What that means is, like I said earlier, certain places are going to be targeted. I just mentioned Lagos that can put in place. Today there's no video we can go and watch to see what actually happened, right? And why is it no surveillance? So there's technology, there's portable cameras nowadays, even the ones you can put in vehicles, the INEC vehicles that are carrying the ballot papers. Can we put those cameras that you put in cars, right? Can we have them in there? So at least, if for anything, even if it doesn't prevent, maybe it would deter them from doing wrong things and driving in the wrong direction. But last, perhaps it will help us with investigations after. So that within those 7 days, right, INEC can watch the video and say, this didn't happen the way it was supposed to. So these are some of the things that we also need to put in place. Crowdsourcing intel. Now, this is very key. I'm an intelligence person in terms of my background. And one thing that we started seeing, Twitter, I know, has done this pretty well for us in the last couple of elections, which is where when people see something as off, they start filming it, they're posting it and saying it. Almost all the security agencies today have apps. Yahweh. NSA has an app, police, military, everybody, right? So what that is supposed to be is for crowdsourcing. They want you, me, individuals, wherever we are, to post anything off that we see. So I think that we need to focus on using that as well as we go into these elections, allowing citizens, and maybe they can broadcast that a little bit more, telling citizens, hey, if you see anything off, post them on these platforms so that we can react to it very quickly. So that's, okay, next slide, please. Bottom line, and this is my conclusion. Good. I think I did 10 minutes. So overarching goal, right? This is the main goal. This is our focus. This is the reason why we're all gathered here today, is that it's important that the voice of the people are heard and that their choices are respected. Okay, we really need to use mothers as well. I know we don't talk about women and really their roles. Let me tell you the role of a woman. There are still some women that have sway in their homes. They have sway in their communities. They are matriarchs. They speak and people listen. I met this lady who's based out in Borno State, and she is one of those people that works very closely with former Boko Haram fighters. And she told me, she said, Tanwa, I go and I talk to them. I've known them since they were young. I tell them the version of Islam they're practicing is not the right one. She confronts them and they listen to her. So imagine having those sort of strong female presence and people where the men, the boys, the youth, they listen to these women and they can tell them the importance of democracy. I have a quick question here. How many of us, where did you learn about democracy? Where? Just mention it. School. For most of us here, we learned about democracy in school. How many out of school people do we have? That means how many Nigerians actually know what true democracy is all about? That is the reason why we keep having instability. Nigerians don't understand democracy. Only those of us that are privileged to have gone to school. If I got A+ in government, that's how much I should know about democracy anyway. What about those who don't make it in school? So this is where those roles of those mothers come in, really explaining and reinforcing what democracy is about. It's not about collecting money. Really, these people are working for you, and we need to just get that narrative and really get them engaged in that as well. So we really all are going to do what we can to make sure the voices of people are heard and that their choices are respected. This is what we're hoping for, and hopefully this is what actually happens at the end of the elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and you are one of the women we listen to as well. Yeah, thank you. But you didn't put CDD on this. Next time, make sure you attribute it properly. Yeah. Is Aklet CDD? We produce it, yes. Yes. Okay, I'll give comments to Mr. Pastor Itua Igudalo. He has been online. He's joined us online. Pastor Itua.
2023 elections, citizens protection and awareness, and the role of stakeholders in post-election stability. I think this is top on everybody's mind at this point in time. And going by Nigeria's trajectory in all the kinds of elections that we've had, and the violence and the challenges that come with it, and the level of ignorance of the general public concerning elections, electioneering, taking decisions, and finally dealing with the issues of voters' acceptability and voting and voting right, vote buying, and all those sorts of things. There's quite a lot of challenges that we need to take into consideration, and we'll need groups well-informed and knowledgeable foundations, agencies, or whatever, to really take up a lot of gauntlet and a lot of education and advocacy to the average person on the streets there, to sort of demystify, if they can, this whole electioneering process and the fear or the anxiety that elections bring. From my perspective, I think there are 3, 4, 5 things that are very, very germane. Number one is the non-availability at this present point in time of really true parties, starting from that. Most of what we have as parties in Nigeria today are platforms that people run on. That is why in the morning a man is in PDP, in the afternoon is in APC, by the evening time is in SDP, and is just running all over the place, because the parties themselves are not well organized. They don't have any ethos and they don't have any direction, and you don't know what you are going into. So that's number one. Number two, for me, is the cost of elections. The cost of elections. We need to totally restructure our campaigning and electioneering. If you don't have billions of naira, it's almost impossible to run a presidential system of elections. And when you don't have a robust party structure that supports the candidate and a good governance process in the party, then you have all manners of wealthy charlatans taking control of the political structure of the different parties. So, for example, if you want to run for an office now in Nigeria, they assess your financial capacity and not your competence or ability to function in that office. Does he have money to run the elections? And that becomes a very, very fundamental thought in candidature. And sometimes you may have money, but you have no character. And that's why we have this problem. So we might need to do a total reform of our electioneering process go back to the parliamentary system, where what you need to do to get a seat in parliament is to win your local government or local area election. And that is easier to fight. We can look for a process for that. The third, of course, is what we've been discussing on this platform, the role of INEC, the seriousness of INEC, the preparedness of INEC, the competence of INEC, the sincerity of INEC, and the ability of INEC to be totally individual, which can be a challenge since who pays the piper sometimes it takes the tune. So that gives undue advantage to the party in power. So we're hoping that we can have a robust INEC, and it is agencies and foundations and well-meaning Nigerians who keep INEC on its toes, keep challenging INEC, keep running at INEC. Let everybody know that Big Brother is watching you, INEC, for you to get the kind of INEC that we need. So we need to look at that. We need to look at that also. And then, of course, the almighty issue of election, vote buying, and election violence and things like that, thuggery all over the place, that can make this whole process very daunting and very frightening for well-meaning people. But regardless to say, in spite of all that, I think Nigeria, we've made some advances, we've made some progress. We have been able to move from real darkness to areas where there's some bit of light, and the automation of the process, the beavers and the things like that are making it, beginning to make it almost foolproof. But what we now need to do is to ensure that we do massively educate the electorate, which is the biggest chink in the armor. A lot of the people on the electorate are seriously disinformed, misinformed. They don't even know what a good candidate is from a bad candidate. They don't know what good governance is from bad governance. They don't know the effects of corruption on their well-being. They don't even view corruption anymore as a bad attribute, and so on and so forth. And therefore, with that kind of thinking, okay, tribalism, religion, anybody who you think has benefited you personally, regardless, and you get the kind of leaders that a nation like Nigeria truly needs. So a lot of investment needs to be put into electoral and electorate information, education, enlightenment, and changing the way they think. I think it is only if we go through that kind of process that we can begin to get credible results of elections in Nigeria. If we don't do that, the people who have the authority, who have the right, who are the greater bullies, and who have the greater resource, regardless of their competence and character, will always seem to steal the day. So there's a big battle ahead of us in Nigeria, and the people, well-meaning people, the elite should come together and stop being afraid of people in power, and come and let's work out how to get a good and sincere Nigeria that has the kind of leadership that it needs. I think these are the few things I want to throw in there, and food for thought, to see how, coming from this entire discussion, I'm hoping that there will be some KPIs, some real steps, that this and this and this and this is what we're going to take off this table, and which we're going to try and implement in whatever little corner anybody is operating in. And that will make the time really well spent and valuable. I want to thank you all again, and I wish everyone good participation on this platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much for part of the KPI you have to take forward for us is the whole prophecy, religious prophecy is playing in these elections. Please, like that. I'll go on and call 3 people. I'll call our sister Umani first to speak, then Dr. MD Aminu and Dr. Ali Modibo will speak after her. Here's the mic, please bring the mic to the front. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having
election. I don't know how to do anything about politics. The only thing I'm aware is I have a PVC and I'm going to vote in this election. I have voted in the last election. The previous one before that, on the way to voting, I parked my car, trying to cross the street to go to the polling unit. I was thinking, do I really live in one of these places? And I said no, and I turned back. But that was because I didn't have that enlightenment that really I have to be the one to decide what kind of leader to have. Coming here, thank you very much. I'm glad I am here. I've learned a lot, especially from you, Tara. Thank you very much. We need people like this around us to be able to tell us this is what to expect and what not to expect. I'm glad that there's a partnership between this organization, I Am Change, and INEC. I've been looking at the partners and sponsors. So my take here is that there's a lot to be done between this organization and INEC, and then each and every one of us. I am from Maiduguri, Borno State. We had to leave because of exactly what's happening and what has been said about this. Last time I went back to Maiduguri was after 6 years. I went this December and I couldn't just go to my house. Everything was scattered. So how do you expect? And then we come, these people do not even have any information about what was being said here today. They don't know how to vote, they don't know how to use their PVCs. All they understand is probably they will give them 5,000, 10,000, a bag of rice because they are hungry. There's a lot going on. Their children have not been to school. So we sit down here, we have these charts about how glamorous charts, I say, about how things should be done, how things should not be done. We should focus on this and this. But who are these people that are listening to you? The educated ones. What about the half uneducated part of Nigeria? What about people from Kano, for example? Last election I was in Kano for something that was happening. And then people were being killed on the streets. You go to the voters, they watch you, who are you going to vote? If you vote anyone that is different from what they want you to vote, they will kill you. They'll beat you up. They stripped politicians out. Now it boils down to my partner Mohammed had said that it boils down to the character of the person you're voting. So I'm now saying, why don't we create an avenue where anyone that is going to be in this space be able to go through a due diligence, to be able to understand the kind of character we are going to vote for, his educational background, his antecedents, what he does for a living. Because we have people, politicians that cannot even speak English. This is our mode of communication. So how do you communicate? How would you vote for a senator that will go and sit down for 4 years, take everything that he could grab, because I call it grabbing, and then he comes and not even a single bill in the National Assembly for his people. Not even a single way of doing things are done, how things should be done properly. Educate his people. One doesn't even go. I heard that one from the Northeast asked, won the election, he came in. After 3 months, he said he's not getting the money he wants to get. He can't waste his time. So he goes back and stays. He said, when they're dividing money, they should call him. Is this the kind of Nigeria? I'm now talking like a Nigerian, not a lawyer, nothing. I'm not calling legislation, I'm not calling regulation. I am calling on us, all of us, to go beyond this room. Educate our people. Educate those people whose lives are very important and they matter to us. Our mothers, our sisters, our relations out there, like Donald Duke said in the Creeks, in Maiduguri, in far where we sleep with our cows in the same room, and we're not educated, our children are not educated. We build schools to show everybody on TV that we have built schools, but no people to be in that school. So due diligence should be carried on these politicians. You know, you see a politician, he's talking, he's blabbing, you don't even know what he's saying, you don't understand the things he's saying. He's not, he's old enough to just sit down and be taking his pension, but he wants to be the head of. We have young people, vibrant, who would say, okay, this is what I want, and this is what I want for my people. People who will say, okay, I didn't wear shoes, I want everybody to wear shoes. Now, these are the kind of people we're talking about, but if not within this room, I beg you, go beyond this and educate all of us on how to vote the right leaders. And that way, you know, a lot of things will happen. Education will come, food, security, everything will be in place. And then we don't have to be fighting each other and killing each other. I was in Rwanda, I was afraid, I was disgusted. I said, how can a people be like this and then even had the courage to leave in because of the genocide? But because they have data, they have everything in place. So you see everything, you see how violence has erupted and how it has affected the lives of everyone in there. But we don't have data, we don't have anything. We just hear people are killed, and you know it's underestimated. Every time there's violence, everything is underestimated. But there you have data, you sit down, I cried, I'm still traumatized at what violence erupted. But there's violence in Nigeria, in as much as there was genocide in Rwanda, there's also an election plays a huge role in that. Please, let's be very vigilant in this election and know our rights. Thank you very much.
You did not speak as a lawyer, but you spoke as a Nigerian, and we need to hear more of that. Yeah, Dr. Modibo.
Thank you. No, don't worry. You already said most half of what I was going to say. But let me begin by expressing how happy I am with this type of occasion on information. And largely because it's been organized and conducted by young, fresh, vibrant Nigerians. I think there are only very few of us here that are over 60. So this gives us hope that we have Nigerians that are passionate about Nigeria. All that you said is absolutely true. I've been avoiding being a politician for a very long time, but I have no choice as a politician. I get involved so much that there is no escape. But with this election, I went around the rallies, the town hall meetings, and wherever I go, at least the few cities that I've gone to, I get worried and get seriously disturbed, because when these mammoth rallies that we see, more than 90% of it populated by young people, and I'm pretty sure about maybe 80% of them without anything to do. They've just been hired for that day, come and fill the stadium. And you can see even others that are around the fringes, as we drive with the motorcade, our motorcade and our siren in the city, you see this despondency in the faces of Nigerians, particularly the young ones. And it's very worrisome. As a matter of fact, it's a time bomb. No, it's not as neat as this. There are highly destabilized. And so elections that will usher in a new set of leaders, very crucial for us. But like we observe, are we going about it the right way? Is the outcome going to be good? Are we going to have the right leaders? Will the process be safe and secure? I don't know. No matter how much we postulate and say that it will be okay, it may not be okay. It's just that we just have to think of what happens after, the day after. The day after the election, the day after the president is declared. But the most important post-election is that of the president. Legislators can come in or not, but that day when the new president will come, with all the intrigues that have been happening, and as you realize, like you said, this is the first or second transition of really, from government that is not, to a new, entirely new set of people. But also another peculiar thing about this election of 2023 is that this is the second set of purely civilian candidates. It's another factor. Because we have been ruled by the military for so many years, and they continue with the government President Basanjo, and then with the President Buhari. Only Umaru and Jonathan, and now hopefully this new set that will come will usher in a new dispensation. And that is why you see the intensity. There's this, because we still have to be reckoned with the military, particularly the high ones. They still call shots. And their template is at variance with what Anwar said, what is democracy. Because even what we experienced over the last 8 years, I don't know whether we can call it democracy, or like Villa says, crazy demo. Crazy demo. So there's really, no clarity in some of us, whether, where we carry the message. Some of you can do it here, which is fine, fantastic. But then we have to find that connection with the local population. Is it going to be easy? No, it's not. Because some of them are beyond reach. The only language they understand is to pay that small stipend and go out and cause destruction and whatever in whatever guys. So I think we just have to continue this type of dialogue. We have to use the social media. Thank God, social media is really powerful now. It may have its own disadvantages, but it has a lot of advantages for us. The message has to be simple, the language has to be clear, because that's another challenge. We have to use the elections in the north, even though it has not been a lot of literature, critical evaluation of the impact. These singers that have really won the election. So you can see, but they do communicate and carry a lot of, in the southwest, it's not like that in the southeast. Let me conclude, since I said the southeast. We were in Imo State 2 weeks ago. Actually, since we started the campaign, all of us, everybody has been avoiding this. Even the governors of hosts tell us, no, don't come now. We postponed it about 2 or 3 times, but we managed to go Imo Owerri. My first time of being in Owerri, actually. Beautiful city, but you can cut attention with the scissors. And it's just like you cannot even veer away from the building. We were warned not to go out. We were all surrounded by security forces from that. Why did you leave your airport almost 3 miles down? No. So it's the southeast, the battleground. And this is something that some of you need to replicate this type of discussion on regional or on particular areas, so that we create, awareness about how most people from the southeast will be disenfranchised when we are helping this election. So I think that is my concern. Sorry for the only, I really commend you for this fantastic occasion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aminu.
Thank you very much. My name is Ahmed Ayuba. I am going to say thank you for organizing this and for making the worthy afternoon. So I think there are many things to say. First of all, I am not a politician. I don't know if I would be interested in partisan politics in the future. I have a PhD in climate change, and I am interested in new career along that line. But I am happy to always identify with opportunities like this, where young sit and discuss the future of Nigeria. And because of my enthusiasm for this stuff, I don't see myself living in Nigeria. I want to live and die in Nigeria. I have met many great Nigerians. Some of them are in this room. We have Dr. Ali, who met me on the internet, and he sent me a message, and you can imagine the number of people who will follow somebody of his faith, but he identified me as what he asked for my number. He called for 1 hour as a communicator, and he identified, he said that there are opportunities in Nigeria when I come back and he wants to introduce me, certain cycles where we will be mentored, and since then, I was privileged, and I'm still privileged to be part of his mentoring. I could go on and on, but then, I want to say that, I was invited into organizing this event by Hafsat David through Malam Jabal Ahmed. He's sitting right behind us, and I want to say that this is a statement. He's making a statement by sitting where he is. So when I came in, actually yesterday I was supposed to, I had a discussion with him yesterday. Probably early morning, that I will pass by his house. He came so that I was late. I felt bad about it that he left. So I came here and I thought I would see him sitting in front. But I saw him sitting right there. And for me, I think this is a statement, because throughout the time that I interact with him, he's always saying that he needs us to lead these things together. He doesn't want to see, to be taking credit, because we are the future, and we should take this future in our hands. So you will also realize that the Dr. came in to the room. He also tried to sit somewhere behind, and the doctor was asked to come to the front. What is this about? This is that, our leaders, our fathers are telling us that it is now our time to take over this country. Like Baba Mufta told us, he said, if you can successfully plan this event, then you do it on a bigger scale.
you can scale this up to take over this country. It is possible. Chido Numa, I knew him a long time ago, but Chido is more than, Chido, are you more than 60? Oh, almost 60. Yeah, but he, at the occasion of Nigeria's 60th independent anniversary, he led a project, and that project was about identifying 60 Nigerians who are under 60 years of age, to write essays, to be published in a book, to discuss the future of the country. So I feel like these are all opportunities that they are giving us, and they are also showing us that it is our time, right? So I want to say that, as young people, we should begin to think that it's high time. Yes, exactly. So in the next 4-8 years, is there a possibility that Tanwa Ashiru will pick up a form and run for president? I think that is possible. And again, beyond us taking this country in our hands, I think we should also not forget that elections come and go, but the process of governance is only made possible. Excellence, if you want excellence in governance, then you need to hold leaders to account. Since I graduated from the university, I've been writing in the newspapers, holding leaders to account. And I don't want to stop. If that would be my only contribution, I will ensure that I keep doing that. So I think that you shouldn't be nice to your leaders. You are employing them. Don't see them as people that you have to tell them what they want to hear. So all the time, try as much as possible to identify what's wrong with your country, and try as much as possible to hold them to account. Don't be violent. Don't be disrespectful. But don't be nice. You can be kind. I say that there is a difference between being kind and being nice. Being nice is to fall in line, is to tell people what they want to hear. Is to be politically correct. But being kind is to tell them the truth. So tell them, pick up a pen, write. And you wouldn't know, the distance that your writings would go. So, I don't know. There are so many things to say, but I need to just round up and say thank you for doing this. Thank you, everyone. Thank you our leaders and our elders for supporting us. And we wish to see more of this. And thank you, Absat. Thank you very much.
Afsa is somewhere around here. So I'll give the panelists 1 minute each to say their closing, to give their closing remarks. 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. I think it's been a wonderful day. There's really nothing else to add. I think you had an issue, Madam Moderator, earlier during the program about all of us being part of this. Maybe this is not the right occasion. I've spent the better part of my almost 60 years of existence worrying about Nigeria and how we can build a nation out of what the colonialists left us in 1960. We've not managed to scratch the surface of that process. For our elite, democracy has become nothing but an opportunity to continue the process of state capture, which started as far back as 1960 when the colonialists left. The whole process of citizens going to vote is just an endorsement of their greed, their profligacy, wanton capture and destruction of our country. But we can't give up. We have a bounding duty, whether we go, some of us who have lived outside the country or schooled outside the country, we are still so much emotionally invested in this country. Never mind those who tell you that there's no other country but Nigeria, yet when they have to do their medical, send their children to school, they remember there are many more countries other than Nigeria. But the important thing is for us to have faith, and I tell a lot of young people, including those that I mentor, I can't stop you. The reality is that nobody can stop you, whether you want to leave this country. I've lived outside Nigeria for almost 30 years, schooled in different parts of the world, worked in different parts of the world. I'm emotionally invested in Nigeria because I feel ashamed as an undergraduate student at the University of Toronto. The problem I had to deal with, I had young people in my class like you've come here to enjoy what our fathers and grandfathers put in place. Why can't you do? That's the sense. They don't tell you, but that's the feeling I get for those of us who are conscious, socially conscious. And whether it's the United States, whether it's Canada, the UK, and so on, these places were built by citizens. We need to understand that it's Nigerians who will build Nigeria. We need to reconstruct this country in the image of the kind of society. It's going to take, it's not going to be an easy work, but we have to start somewhere. And part of that process is to engage the country, to engage leaders, as Mohammed mentioned. This election affords us an opportunity to do something. We may not get it right, but nation building, again, as people have said, it's not a tea party, it's not a walk in the park. Let's not lose hope. Let's not give up. Those will be my final comment.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. You know, I definitely think a lot has been said already today, and we're just very grateful. I'm excited because it's finally our turn, right? The young people. Someone mentioned the other day that apparently for a lot of the politicians, this is like their last chance. That is, they're done. And I know many of us young people have been, because it really is our turn. And if you think about it, as difficult as things can be in this country, we can't negate how great we are as a people. All over the, really great we are. So I served in the U.S. military. I was in the Air Force. And I remember then, like, one of the things I would always do, because we had like a global email address book, and I would just go and type in like Nigerian names just to see how many Nigerian names come up. So I type in like Ogun, and then you see also Ogun this, Ogun that, Ogun Ade, Ogun. Or I type in Ade and see names, you know. And just to show that, you know, a lot of us are out there doing amazing things. Few of us do come back here to try to make things happen. Some come and just can't hang because it's not for the faint-hearted at all. It's the reason why I've always said I would never really get into politics. It's not easy. I know that. And I have to ask myself, am I ready for everything that it comes with? But, you know, I'm excited that we're here. Regardless, we're going to back those people that we know will bring results for us in this country. December in Lagos, apparently, so I live in Lagos. December in Lagos is a thing. I'm sure most of you have already heard. Hashtag. People from all over the world. You go out and you hear accents, all sorts of, in Lagos we say orishi, different accents, you know, and you're asking people, and some of them had no ties to Nigeria. They literally, oh, I'm from Turkey, I just came to Nigeria for Christmas. So we have something that the world is looking for. And I really think it's time that we take advantage of that we're voting in the people that will help us harness this thing properly, that will give young people a chance. I say education for me, that's the one thing that whoever is coming in needs to take very seriously, because that's what's creating our mindsets as people. I was watching something the other day in Japan. These kids in Japan are doing times table in the millions, and they can get the answer. So they will tell you the answer is 984 quadrillion, 733 trillion, this is it. And they're calculating in less than a minute. There's some, they learn it using the abacus. So you have like young people who are learning things, they're educated. And I remember watching that and I thinking Japan can never suffer. They can never be broke because they have minds, people that are thinking. And that is the assets we have in this country. It's not the oil. It's the minds that can do numerous things with those resources. So whoever it is that's coming in, I liked what you said about holding the leaders accountable. In the area of education, let's make sure we take that very seriously as well. Enough of Nigerian children on the streets, enough of schools closing down because people don't think it's important. Learning on that, I went to Federal Government College, Lagos. I saw a picture of the school the other day. My heart broke. Roof gone. And I remember when we were there, we had roofs. But yeah, we didn't have any windows. Louvers are broken, but at least there was a roof. And then now it's just we're sliding backwards. That needs to stop. So please, definitely young people, it's our time. Let's make the right choices and let's make sure that going forward, our government develops and focuses and invests in the minds of our young people as well, in the lives of the youth, our music, our culture. We have a lot to give to the world. And I know we're just getting started as a people. So thank you.
Thank you. My only final words are the fact that, just to remind us that as Nigerians, I think the starting point really is to have an uncompromising love for your country. We can't do but to love this country. Nigeria will happen to you, Nigeria will test you, Nigeria will put you in those very uncomfortable places, but you have to love this country. I think that's just the starting point. And for the youth, I think we are better built, right, better experience to take this country to where it needs to be than our leaders and our fathers are facing out. And I'll give you an example. The reason for the Ango must go crisis in Nigerian universities, the reason they did that, you can't even protest on those bases in your father's house today. You can't. You can't. Now these people went to school for free. There were about 10, 15, maximum 20, 50 in a class, right? Their classes were air conditioned, they had the best professors, their securities were guaranteed. Some of them even had milk delivered to their doors. Nigerian universities, right? Most of us went to school, like in my own class, were 450. Yes, combined the Sharia and civil law, 450. You could hardly hear the lecturer. Lectures were 7 o'clock, you have to come out. Before you come out, you go and get water from Tudunwada. Right? A lot of this. And we made it to where we are. And we are doing what we are doing today. So we are better built to take this country to where it needs to be. So we just need to love this country and understand that we have work to do and just get to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think the resilience of Nigerians, in spite of it, that's what makes us successful everywhere we go. And it's our human capital that speaks for us. It's not the oil. All the Nigerians in this room, just count the numbers, say 100 of us have we've got like different things to bring on board. All this knowledge, this ability, this drive, it's just too much. Even I feel so energized to actually do more coming to this event. And this elections is actually a good opportunity for us. When they tell us each time that elections is not just to vote leaders, it's an opportunity to renegotiate the future. It's an opportunity to actually renegotiate development. And that is what is actually presenting to us. And the choice is now in our hand. Our PVC is there. If every one of us today decides to speak to 10 people, imagine what the change will actually be. Just imagine. And I think this will be a charge, another KPI, that our KPI will not just be talking to government or INEC, but how many people do we ensure actually get to the polls on the day of the elections? The same way Hafsa has actually brought us here. Malam Aftar brought us here without giving us the option to even say no. I'm supposed to be in Port Harcourt, but to say no is like, it's like an impossibility because it's a commitment. And it's this commitment that we need to actually put up there in our own hearts. So we have to recruit more and more people and recognize that elections is actually as difficult as that. if, for instance, INEC security, they do the right thing or not, if we had our own portion to it, particularly in doing the right things will go on fine. And accountability is key. And when we talk about electoral accountability, most times people really think that the focus should be on the outcome, monitoring the vote. But the vote is not the vote we cast on the day of election. That is first phase. The most important phase is ensuring that that vote delivers development to us. And I hope that with this 2023 elections, our vote will not just count, but we will ensure that it delivers development to us. Thank you very much. And on that note, I invite Hafsa to say thank you to us. Thank you.
Wow, what a great event. Thank you everybody, especially the speakers. Thank you very much for your presentations. They are very, very inspiring. And also to the attendants from, we have attendees from Abuja University and some other organizations. So I would like to welcome you. I would also like to speak on the organization, ooAM Change. So ooAM Change was founded in 2015, which was an election year. And starting from the registration year, we were very active in the 2015 elections. We had an interview with the front-running candidate at the time, where we spoke about the most major critical youth challenges in Nigeria. And I'm very proud to say that some of the discussions that we had during that interview, which he has promised to implement if he goes into office, which he eventually did, have been implemented and are part of his policies. And I believe that ooAM Change was the first platform for those issues to be discussed, such as youth participation in the electoral process and the not too young to run bill. So I'm very proud that ooAM Change was a platform for that. And yes, as well as other youth-centered issues like the creative loans from Central Bank, which is not very popular at the moment, not to go deeply into political issues, but nonetheless, the administration has provided those sort of measures for youth and all of that. All those were discussed during that interview. And going further, in 2019, we had another event at Bayes University, which was also focusing on youth in politics and the future of Nigeria. That was in 2019. So just to show you the consistency of the organization with electoral processes and elections. And of course, today we're here in the 2023 elections, and I'm proud to say that we have improved and grown from those two previous engagements. I'm very happy about where we are today. The panel, the quality of panel, the contributors and everything have improved very well, and that's a great honor to us. Thank you very much. Also, I would like to round up by thanking my planning team. I would like to thank Dr. M.D. Aminu, who is here today. I would also like to thank my ooAM Change team, Wisdom and Mariam. I would like to also thank Dr. Ahmed Shehu, who has not made it here, unfortunately. He's not here with us, very helpful. And of course, most of all, I would like to give a special thanks to Baba Muftau, Malam Muftau Baba Ahmed. He really embodies everything that ooAM Change upholds, which is leadership and mentoring, as well as self-determination. From the name of the organization, you see ooAM Change is all about self-belief, self-determination, and self-improvement. And Malam Muftau Baba Ahmed is the embodiment of that. He supports, he builds, he mentors, and encourages us to keep going. So thank you very much, Malam. of Tabara Ahmed. Yes, I would also like to urge all of the attendees to please follow us so that we'll be updated on this electoral process and beyond. Afterwards, we'll still be having some programs and all of that. So we have our social media handles. I am Change. Some of you, I'm sure, we've spoken about social media a lot today. So it's very important to put your voices out there, your take. Never think that you're irrelevant or your opinion or your action is irrelevant. It's always relevant. So I urge you to engage with us on social media and we'll form a lifelong partnership, God willing. Thank you very much. Thanks.